Gridiron football is probably as essential to the American identity as apple pie, the Second Amendment, and kicking ass at the Olympics. The only easier topic to start a casual conversation about in this country besides sports, specifically football, is probably just the weather. If you're talking to a guy in the drive-thru at McDonald's in the middle of December in Michigan, then the easiest things to talk about are how well the Detroit Lions are or aren't doing, and how blasted cold it is. Talking to a guy on the train in New York City in the middle of July, the easiest things to talk about are probably if you think the Jets are going to do okay this year, they won't, or how freaking hot it is. If you're meeting a new kid on the first day of school in Texas, the easiest things to talk about are probably how the Cowboys are totally going to make it to the Super Bowl this season, they also won't, or how pretty the leaves look once they start changing colors. As such, football's made for a lot of great and not so great films, and it's hard not to see why. Sports films in general are a pretty simple narrative with lots of opportunities for memorable visuals, like the big catch for a touchdown or a big tackle that knocks a player into the air so hard you half expect the offensive player to holler, "Looks like he broke his leg off again!" And since the big game is right around the corner, I figured, what better time to talk about a few notable football movies from days gone by. So with that all the way, let's go!
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Let's start this off with a classic. Let's start off with Remember the Titans. This was a pretty popular film, so I don't need to summarize it, but just in case, here's the gist. The film follows a recently integrated high school football team in 1971, and the struggles of all these white and black players learning to trust each other and be a team, and then learning to carry that trust for each other that they built during training camp into the real world when the school year officially begins. The film is anchored by a rock star performance from the great and powerful Denzel Washington as Coach Herman Boone. The thing I really like about this film, and Coach Boone in particular, is that they have a very practical mindset about race. Integration, equal rights, and equal treatment of the law, these are all terrific things. But Boone isn't here to be an activist. He's not quoting Malcolm and Martin, he's a football coach. He's here to win some damn football games. And it just so happens that doing so requires forcing these dumb kids to actually start to see eye to eye, because every team requires the players to, actually get along with each other, and be willing to stand in the same room without ripping each other's faces off for the simple crime of breathing the wrong way in their presence. A negative review of the film for one Owen Gleiberman of Entertainment Weekly even described Coach Boone as, quote, Martin Luther King and Vince Lombardi rolled into one nostalgically omnipotent tough love saint. I disagreed with his review, but that really is the perfect descriptor for Coach Boone. I also really like how these boys show a wide variety of attitudes towards race. You've got white kids like Ray Buds, who don't like black people, won't pretend to like black people, and will start conflict with black people and with his fellow white players if they try to defend their fellow black players. But you've also got guys like Sunshine Louie, who were very quick to integrate themselves with the black players because all this racism crap just seems like a waste of time. And the flip side of that, you've got black kids like Blue and Reb who are amendable to getting along with the white kids if they're nice to them as well. But then you have Wood Harris's Julius Campbell, who, at the start of the film, is incredibly dismissive of trying to make friends with his white teammates, and even accuses his black teammates of being foolishly quick to try to make friends with them as well. And even after his character development during training camp, when they're all back at school, he makes a brief assumption that those same teammates are back to not caring about their fellow black players. He does realize before long that he was jumping to conclusions, but the fact that he did jump to those conclusions at all is pretty indicative of what his mindset is, usually. But at the end of it all, the players and the staff still come together for a perfect 13-0 season. Not without any drama, of course, but they still get past it because nothing unites the world quite like sports, especially football. And now we move into the dark side of high school football, but with the added fun of exploiting children. The movie follows James Vanderbeek as the backup QB for a high school team in Texas, who has to finish up the season after the team's starting quarterback gets hit with an especially horrific injury. On the surface, this seems like your typical high school movie until early on when a character named Billy Bob gets concussed and the coach insists that he gets back out on the field, which itself is pretty awful, but you could maybe rationalize it by saying, oh, it's the end of the game, what could really happen? But that layer of rationalism flies out the window when Billy Bob passes out in class the next Monday, and when the nurse says he should sit out the next couple games, the coach lays on him and says, oh, you're fine, you can play again this week. Fast forward to Friday, and Billy Bob passes out on the line of scrimmage and can't block for his quarterback, resulting in the aforementioned injury. And what does the coach do? Does he take accountability for what happened and say, I'm sorry boys, this is not my fault? No, he immediately places the blame on Billy Bob and says that if the kid had just done his job, the quarterback wouldn't have gotten hurt in the first place. And dealing with this is already enough pressure, but then you've also got Vanderbeek having to deal with the normal pressures of high school and the pressures of going from a person with no expectations to suddenly having all the expectations in the world placed on you. It'd be enough to make anyone lose their head, but luckily the kid manages to keep his focused on his future and managing not to self-destruct under his psychotic coach, even when this maniac actually tries to literally strangle him. The boy's not perfect, he does make a pretty stupid mistake with his boys, and also makes a really bad mistake with his best friend's girlfriend, but he listens to the call of his better angels and walks away before it's too late. It's a pretty solid high school movie with an especially great performance from Jon Voight as the psycho coach. I do question how realistic this is. I don't remember any of this crap happening when I was in high school, but I was also a shut-in who never did anything in high school, and my senior year was 14 years after this movie's premiere. So maybe it was this crazy. Who knows, really? And before we move on, here's a little fun wrestling trivia related to this movie. If you follow All Elite Wrestling, you're more than likely familiar with multi-time world champion Jon Moxley. Well, here's the fun fact. Jon's name actually comes from another indie wrestler misremembering James Vanderbeek's character's name, Jon Moxon. See, before Jon was a Death Rider, before he was the Lunatic Fringe in WWE, and before he was just a really sick guy in the independent scene, he and his then tag team partner, Cody Hawk, came up under the gimmick of a pair of star high school athletes, complete with being led to the ring by a pretty girl just as a cheerleader. Now, what does that have to do with football? Not much, actually, but it's a good segue into our next film. Gridiron Gang is a movie about a bunch of kids in juvenile hall playing some football while being coached by The Rock. That sounds pretty fun, right? So the story goes that at a certain point, Dwayne's character, Coach Porter, just realized he's not making any headway with these kids. And he realizes that the big things they need to learn are how to work with others, how to deal with aggressive impulses in a constructive way, and just having a solid goal to achieve, to work towards. And so Dwayne's ultimate idea is, why don't we put all these kids on a football team? It might be crazy enough to work. And it actually does work out pretty well. This is a pretty good movie. Dwayne does a really solid job as a hard-ass coach that still has compassion and cares about his players. More Denzel in Titans than Jon Voight in Varsity Blues. Exhibit as Dwayne's assistant coach also does a pretty good job. I don't listen to nearly enough hip-hop, and I'm not too familiar with the man's filmography, so this was my first time seeing him in anything, and I gotta say, I was pleasantly surprised. And as far as the actual boys go, they all do a pretty good job. You can definitely see that, while these are bad kids, they're still kids, and they're still capable of turning it around. They've made some mistakes, a few of them even made some really terrible mistakes, but that doesn't have to define them. Dwayne's Coach Porter even explicitly says that these boys at the start of the film are a bunch of losers, but becoming part of this team, they can become something better, and they rise to the challenge. They take the chance to grow from troubled youths to substantive young men with the help of some good old-fashioned American football. And judging by the fact that Dwayne's Coach Porter at the start of the film touts that of the boys that are released from juvenile detention facilities, about 75% reoffend and get sent back to the pen, but of the 32 boys on his team, 24 went on to further their education, 3 got full-time jobs, and only 5 went back to prison. I'd say that experiment worked out pretty darn well. Good job, guys. Okay, so we've done 3 movies so far about high school football. You know, it seems like actual pro football is being a little underrepresented here. What do you think about that, Jamie? Do you think I ought to talk about at least one movie actually about a professional football team and not some amateurs? Just tell me what you think about that idea, man.
I like it.
Okay, good to hear, man. Please put your clothes back on. Any given Sunday, follows two main stories. Al Pacino as the aging head coach of the fictitious team, the Miami Sharks, and Jamie Foxx as the third string quarterback that just got bumped up to the starter after both QB1 and QB2 went down with injuries before the second half of the game. And all the while, the new owner of the team, Cameron Diaz, is breathing down Al's neck to freaking get this team together, or she's firing him and replacing him with her new offensive coordinator. The film explores both the sheer debauchery of being an NFL team and also the debate of individualism versus teamwork in a team sport, as exemplified by Jamie Foxx as Will Beeman. See, Willie's experienced a great deal of both racial prejudice and just plain bad luck in his day before becoming the starting quarterback for the Sharks. And at this point, he's decided he's only going to look out for number one. A fair conclusion to come to, but he's also clearly just a selfish and immature individual, as exemplified by him taking off time from practice to shoot a music video and asking out the owner of his team in front of said team and literally reading the newspaper on the bench before QB1 and 2 were even injured. But on the other hand, Al Pacino's Tony D'Amato is someone who focused on football to the detriment of everything else, including his relationship with his wife and children. He's lived a lot of life and he's got an excellent mind for the game of football, but his interpersonal skills are quite what they need to be, though not for lack of trying. Eventually, the two men do come to see eye to eye and manage to find some common ground, thanks in part to the example of QB1 Jack the Captain Rooney, played by Dennis Quaid, and some solid advice from middle linebacker Luther the Shark LeVay, played by NFL legend and one-time WrestleMania main eventer Lawrence Taylor. And once they can finally get their heads together, the two of them even make it to the Super Bowl together. Well, okay, it's called the Pantheon Cup, probably because the studios didn't want to shell out for the NFL license, but still, they formed a pretty great relationship together. And not unlike Varsity Blues as well, the film explores a lot of the darker sides of professional football. Ownership that treats players like cattle, ownership that have billions at their disposal, but would rather haggle with the city about paying for their stadium, team doctors that refuse to lay down the law and tell players no when they're too hurt to compete, coaches that lean on injured players and plead with them to come back before they're ready, and players that are so hopped up on alcohol, painkillers, and PEDs that they're making absurd decisions because they can't function like a normal human being anymore. If you thought Billy Bob keeping a pet pig was bad, try having Leatherface himself toss a baby alligator into the showers while everyone's washing up after a game. Yeah, that movie is just some rowdy high school kids. This movie is guys who have lost their impulse control because of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and head trauma. I will also say, for as much as I enjoyed the film, the beginning and the end of the film kind of make me more interested in seeing different stories centered on these characters. When the film opened with QB1 and 2 both getting injured and taken off the field, I thought it would have been cool to see a full narrative film centered on a seasoned coach and a backup quarterback having to navigate a championship game together in real time, cutting back and forth between the players and the staff talking to each other and devising plays on the spot. I also thought the ending, and spoilers if you haven't seen this film, with Al and Jamie going out west to a new expansion team in Arizona, with Jamie as their starting quarterback and Al Pacino as their head coach and general manager, really had the potential for a pretty interesting story in and of itself. I really thought it could have been cool to see somewhat of the same story we saw here, but instead of Jamie getting big-headed because he's the starter by default, he's getting big-headed because he's the starter of the greatest coach of all time, because that guy picked him to be his new quarterback and of anyone else in the world. All the same, Any Given Sunday is a pretty good movie with another gem of a halftime speech from Al Pacino during the film's climax. Right up there with Denzel, Dwayne, and Paul Walker. Hey, still good stuff. If there's any particular football movie you wanted to hear my thoughts on and were surprised that I didn't mention, well, that's mostly because I just wanted to keep this to 4 movies, and we're on a bit of a time crunch, seeing as how I'm recording the script on February 7th, and the Super Bowl is literally just tomorrow.
We really suck. You got that right.
There's a few other movies I wanted to talk about, but passed on because I thought these 4 were the most interesting ones that I could talk about. If this video and a couple of the football movies that I do plan to talk about later, because I did write about them, I just cut them from this script, maybe we'll do this again next year with some other picks. Comment your suggestions if you have any. Until then, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review, and if you did, like this video and subscribe to my channel. This was my first time talking about sports movies, so let me know if I should stick to anime and comic movies, or if you think I did okay. I said during my Best of the Year video that I was going to talk about the Jordan Peele produced film Him during this video, but I wound up cutting that portion of the script out, and it'll now be its own video that I'll be dropping sometime in the next few weeks. I've got plans to do some anime videos in the near future, videos about Frieren, Spy Family, My Hero Academia, and Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. So if any of those shows sound neat to you, click the bell icon for notifications so you'll know when I get them posted. Have a great day, everyone. Woodstock out.